Hey friends, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. So I ended up getting a 250 size quadcopter kit from hobbyking.com. It's their FPV250. This is the frame right here, and you can see I've got some stuff strapped to it already. But basically, scoot my stool over here. Basically, you have a black plastic fiberglass composite frame. It's fairly lightweight, actually, kind of nice. You've got this bay right here, which is about a ½ inch deep. For your flight control board, it fits nicely the KK board or a Naves 32, anything that is 45 by 45 millimeters. It comes with these little guys, and these are actually landing skids, and these mount right up underneath here. And they just kind of snap in, and they're supposed to seat like that, but they pop out really easily. I'm not going to be using these because I want a belly lander, so that if I come in low to the ground, I don't have anything hanging down. If for some reason I skip, I don't want something to catch and flip the quad. It comes with some screws. It comes with a bunch of these little screws, and then it comes with these little black screws. These guys right here, and these are for your motor mounts. So as you can see on the bottom, I've got, let's see if I can catch the light there. There you go. You can see I've got it mounted up. Now what's nice about this is you can go as small as a 14 millimeter mount, and you can go all the way up to, let's see, those are 28 millimeters wide, and that's from, let's see, the widest point to the widest point there. I have my Eternity Multi-Stars. These are the 350QX replacements, and I've got them on here just for now because the motors that I wanted, the higher kV motors, weren't in stock. Because I do want, because I'm running the lower kV motors on it for now, I want a higher pitch. And you can run up to a 6-inch prop on these. So because these are the Blade 350QX replacement motors, it has the mounting for the B props. So what I've done is I've taken a set of B props and chopped them down. So that's what comes with the frame. And then because this is an FPV racer, I went ahead and I purchased this here gimbal setup. Now this is actually can be a 2-axis gimbal. It is a 2-axis gimbal. I'm only using it as a 1-axis. All I want is the tilt, so that when I accelerate forward and the quad pitches up, nose is down. Let's see, how did I do that here? I want this guy to pitch the camera up, so that it keeps my horizon level. And this is a really nice, cheap gimbal. I think the gimbal was like, I'm pretty sure it was less than $4. And it's all pretty thin fiberglass. It's not carbon fiber. with just little fiberglass panels here. There's 4 pieces, so the base plate, the 2 side pieces, and then the piece that your camera and servo mount to. These super glue the base pieces together. The swivel piece here rotates it in a set of bearings. This servo is actually a Turnigy, I believe it's a 13 gram metal geared servo. Digital, of course, and that's going to be run off the KK board. The other thing this frame comes with is this little guy right here. This is the cage that fits over the bay for your flight controller. So if you have everything underslung, this is going to protect your flight controller. Not using that either. I will show you what I am using here in a minute. The little pads, fore and aft, are supposedly for your FPV gear. So if you take your gimbal, I'm going to mount mine up like this, because once again everything's top slung. They say you can mount it up underneath, and this is supposed to be front because it's got that pod right there. Where the hell did it go? Which is for, dear Lord, I'm losing everything today. And I'm going to find it, and it's going to be like right there. Let's grab one of these guys. This fits your 9 gram servo. So if you had your pan set up on that gimbal, head tracking for instance, you want to look left to right, this is specifically set up for that. And then at that point it doesn't matter if it's top slung or underslung, it just slides right in. I'm not going to be using that either. Like I said, I'm going to be top slinging my FPV camera just like that, and most likely zip tying it down, because, well, I'm a big fan of zip ties. What I am doing is I've got one of these, and this is another hobbyking deal. I believe this one was for, I think this one was for the HAL as a battery tray. But what I'm going to do is mount it right above here. Now hobbyking does sell what they call a long plate adapter kit. And you've got a plate that bolts here, kind of comes out like that, one fore and aft, and it's hooked to a top plate, kind of like the blackout H-quad. And you got the top plate on top, hooked to the risers. The only drawback with that is you can't use 6-inch props, because your stand-ups bolts to the frame here, here and here. Well, it comes out to here, and you have your risers, or your standoffs over here, and a 6-inch prop will hit that. 6-inch props on these are very, very tight. I believe they come in pretty close to right here. Well, I'll show you exactly how far they come in. Yeah, that's how far a 6-inch prop comes in. Now here's some of the drawbacks of the frame, and this is just what I've noticed right off the bat. If you've got your KK board mounted in here just like that, running your wires from your ESCs is going to be a little bit of a pain in the butt. Everything's supposed to be nice and secure and tucked away. How are you going to run your wires if you have your KK board mounted down like that? Well, what I ended up doing is I've ported a couple holes, 2 on each side, and I believe these are like 5 30-second holes or something like that. so that I can run my ESC power wires into the bay underneath, because I do want these to be tucked away. You would think that hobbyking would think about, well, how in the hell are you going to run your motor or your wires, given that the way they have it set up anyway, your battery sits flush on the bottom. Well, aside from these battery strap slots right here, there's no other access into the bottom of the bay. And I mean, even this, having your battery strapped right there and having your wires come up underneath, I don't like that. I mean, if I was going to bring them in, because they want you to strap the ESCs underneath here, you're going to have to port here and bring them in. Well, then your battery's running right next to it. I'm not a big fan of that. So that's why I ended up going through the side of the bay instead of in from underneath. Now, oh, there was the other thing. With the KK board, you'll notice right here in the bay, let me see if I can get that. There's this little, I don't know what it's for. Maybe it's to hold the board off the bottom, but that's like 3/16 of an inch. But it's nice because it gives you alignment for punching a hole through so that you can screw your KK board down, or your Naze 32, or whatever flight controller you're using. Like I say, I will probably end up switching to the Naze 32 at some point, but I want to try this with the KK board, just because I know that the KK board has the gimbal output for my tilt. So what we've got here, we're doing the soldering, and I decided against doing the full power distribution board just because this thing's a little bit heavy. So I've got my positive and negative coming in from my ESCs, and then I've got my power from my battery, and this is going to be hooked up to an EC3 connector. What I'm going to end up doing right now is getting my hot glue gun, because I want to glue those down. So we've got the trusty big ass Walmart hot glue gun. I'm going to get that heated up. But in the meantime, I'm also fitting my KK2 board. So we've got down in here, you can kind of see the hole right there. That's an 1/8 inch hole. And we've got, oh Jesus, I hate these. We've got our board mounting screws. Now these are 17 millimeters long by, well, I think 2 millimeters. It says 2.5 on my caliper. And because this is going to be a belly lander, I want the heads of the screws coming in from the bottom. That way I don't have a nut on the underside. And we're just going to put a piece of electrical tape over that to hold it in place. I don't want the nut on the underside so that if for some reason I come in hard, I don't want it to scratch up, because if you've ever tried to pull a nut off of a worn off, ground down bolt, it does not work very well. So okay, so I've got all 4 of those on. You see the studs coming up through. Now I've got these 1/4 inch by, I think they're M4 or M6 nylon spacers or standoffs. I'm just going to push those down right into here because I want that KK2 board up off of here. And these spacers, these are like 30 cents at my local hardware store. So okay, spacers are installed. Now we're just testing the KK2 board, testing the fit on it. And there we go. Now you can see she's pretty flush with the top of the board here. And that's going to give us enough room underneath here once these are glued down that nothing's going to be touching the back of the board. And even so, with the connections right in the middle of the bay, you can see there's nothing on the middle of the board. Just like that. And then we have 4, nylock nuts. Now if you've ever used these, the nylocks are really good, because once you tighten it and you get down into this nylon right here in the middle, on the top side of it, those act as a lock nut. And with the vibration, the nylon keeps these from vibrating loose. So I'm going to take the KK board back off. That glue gun is ready to go. Now, because I do have additional soldering to do to the pieces here, I'm actually just going to glue down the wires. So just a little dab right next to the solder joint there. On both the positive and negative side, and just push it into the glue until it dries or cools down. I don't know if hot glue dries, if that's the proper term for it, or if you would just say it cools down. I don't know. I don't think it really matters. Okay, so that's our basic wiring. Then what we have is we have our female JST plug that's going to come in through this port in the side, but I need a longer one, and that's going to go up to the KK board on this pin right here. This is the battery input voltage pin, and this pin tells the KK2 board what your remaining battery voltage is, and this has to be hooked up for the buzzer to work properly, for the low voltage alarm buzzer. The next thing that we have to do is we've got this little inline switch. As I just hooked up last night. And remember, if you're switching, you always switch the ground side. This is going to go in, and we're going to put this in the same port back here as our power. I'm just going to slide that sucker in. And I made this last night. I didn't know exactly how much I needed. I'm trying to do this the easiest way possible because I want this switch to sit nice and flush. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and marked my positive where I need it. And so we're going to go ahead and cut it here much. And we'll strip this guy back. Just a little bit there. I'll go ahead and take just a little bit off. I think I'm going to need to take some off the negative side as well, but I have enough extra wire length that I can do that while it's in the frame. Okay, while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and take my hot glue gun and give a little dab right on the bottom of that. And mount that down into place. Now, instead of having to fumble with a JST plug to connect my lights, I'll just be able to flip that little switch on right there. Let's give a little bit more hot glue on the back side here. I just want to make sure that's nice and connected. Okay. So we can bring our wire around. I'll set it down here just a second. Do that. And do that. So now we have our wires. Just like that, ready to go. Try not to block the camera while I do this. There we go. Now we have our lights wired in. Now all we have to do is actually connect the lights, which I still haven't quite figured out where I'm going to mount them, but we've got power for them when we do, or when I do, rather. Next, we've got our FPV module, which is actually powered. I put my JST plug in here, which is going to be nice since I kind of need this one. So I figure now, really all I'm doing right here is trying to get the length from here out and back up. So we're going to fit the KK board on here, plug that sucker in, and actually, you know what, let's just go ahead and feed it through. These are the nicest bent needle nose pliers. I love these things. They're easy for getting into tight spaces. And we'll set the KK board down there, and we'll just kind of pull these wires until I'm happy with how much is sticking out here. Then I'm going to hold down right here and lift the KK board off and flip it around there. Now, push my fingers right there, hold them, spread those out. And cut them to length. Okay, now that those are cut to length, take the KK2 board off, find the wire strippers. You don't need to strip much. About 1/4 of an inch is really all you need. So good. There. There we go. Now we have the sense voltage for the KK2 board hooked up. And just screw these down because these wiggle a little bit over here. I'm gonna more hot glue. I'm not going to overdo it though. Just enough to keep that stuff held down because I really don't want it bouncing around inside here because it's an FPV quad racer. There's going to be crashes and all that shit happening. Okay. So we've got that. Okay, let's just fit this KK board down. Since we've got everything hooked up that we're going to need to fly it with. So take these 9-lock nuts. We're just going to start the threads. Now on this last corner here, these pins, and these pins are to flash the KK2 board. These pins are really, really close. And this is going to be just a little bit big. So if I'm lucky here, I'll be able to catch a few threads, before I get down onto that pin. And I've got a few, it's caught. So now we're going to flip the KK board back over. Pull off the electrical tape. Take your hex driver on the one side and take your bent needle nose on the other and go ahead and tighten that down. Now this is the reason that we went with the 1/8 inch holes, because they're just a little bit bigger. They give the machine screws enough room to turn inside that hole, because I had originally drilled them out with like a 7/32 or something small. It was just the perfect size. If I had wanted to thread them in from the top and cut threads into the plastic. And that was something what I thought about doing. However, I decided to do this. Okay, there we have it. Our KK board is firmly mounted Now, if I had planned on, where in the hell did that thing go? Where did I throw it? Because I know I threw it somewhere. There it is. If I planned on using this guy right here, which is the cage, it goes over the KK board, well, I've got the KK board up too high. It does not sit flush anymore. So it's kind of a good thing I didn't plan on using that in the first place. Now, let us grab right quickly, a new set of EC3 connectors, males. Now, if you have a local hobby store close at hand, I recommend picking up lots of these things. If you scratch build stuff, as I scratch build stuff, you go through them quite a bit. Okay, so we're just going to snip off. That's a good guess because we've got the lead off the battery itself. Now this is the battery. This is a 1500 milliamp Turnigy with a fairly long lead. So I don't need a whole hell of a lot of lead off the battery. We're going to go ahead and split our lead. And we're strip off. Really, you only need to strip off about 1/4 of an inch of this stuff. Take your male EC3 connector, pop them in your helping hands. Now if you want to see here, I've actually got my helping hands clamped down to my bench. It is a lifesaver. It doesn't move. It doesn't matter which side you start with. Because they're both the same. It only matters once you go to put the plastic casing on it, what your positive and negative is. On the EC3, the flat-sided connector is always your positive. So we're going to start off here. We're going to tin our wires. And then start melting solder inside your EC3 connector till you get pretty damn close to the top. Bring it on over, dip your wire in there, let it go. And as soon as it cools, you now have a wired up EC3 connector. Pop the other one in here. It's okay if you smoke. Breathing this in is no more harmful than a cigarette. Okay, we now have our EC3 connectors. Those are still kind of hot, so I'm going to wait for them to cool down. However, I am going to start bringing power in from my ESCs to the KK board. Now, if you've never set up a KK board, your left side is your receiver inputs, along with your battery sense and your buzzer. The right side of the board is your motor output, starting from 1 going to 8. You can run an octocopter off one of these things. On both sides, your signal wire is inboard. that puts your ground outboard. So, and I'm doing that wrong because my number one motor is this guy right here. And just because I'm testing this right now, it really doesn't matter. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's get that in frame. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, what about your receiver, you ask? Well, I will answer that question right now. I'm using a Free Sky setup. This is a 4-channel. Let me move that back up here. This is a 4-channel what's that? ACCST Free Sky D4R, D4R2 receiver. And I have this set up, if you can see that with that jumper right there. This receiver is set up for PPM. And PPM, I can't remember what it stands for, but the other, where you have one for each channel, is PWM. PPM is you have one lead for all your channels. This guy right here, you can see, has the signal wire taken out of it. This is just power. So with the KK2 board, we're going to take our receiver wire and we're going to plug it into channel 1 on the receiver side of the board. Now, the power wire is actually going to be set up for the gimbal, and because power is split between the first 4 and the last 4, we need to provide power to the last 4, so we're going to take our power wire here and hook it up to motor number 5. Okay. Now, we can take our Turnigy 9X with the Free Sky module in it. We're going to plug her back in. Okay, so we got safe mode. We're going to arm it, and we're actually going to provide power. So this is actually providing power out to the ESCs. It doesn't matter that they're not hooked up. None of the wires are touching. But you can see, as I tip the quad, the gimbal moves. Okay, so now we've got, we're at this point, we have the KK board mounted. I've got the standoffs for, dear Lord, for the upper plate that has the FPV transmitter and the receiver mounted to it, and this is also where the battery is going to sit. But what we have with the original, or with the ESCs, is we had really long servo connectors. I mean, that plus that amount. So I mean, they're really dang long. So what I ended up doing, what we're going to do here, is we're cutting the servo wires down to length. And I got a servo pin kit from my local hobby shop. So it comes with these pins right here, and it comes with a bunch of blank male servo connectors. So we're going to make our own servos, our own servo connectors on the ends. So I've already got 3 of them done here. I just got to do the fourth one. And these are pretty easy, so you snap off one of these little guys here. Now, you can see up close, this is the end that plugs into the servo connector. You've got two little tabs right here. This first tab is going to be, holds the wire in contact with the pin. The second one back here holds the wire in place. I'm trying, I would love to be able to get a close-up view of this, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get too close-up of a view. So we've got our three servo wires. Strip them back about an 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch. Take your pin and you're going to lay this down. Let me see if I can't get this up close enough here. You're going to lay that down so the wire lays right in there. And then with your needle nose pliers, you take and crimp this sucker down. And clamp the back side down. Okay, that's that. Now we're going to take our servo connector and try and line these up as best as you can. Now you're going to notice on these connectors, one side has these little clippies, the other side does not. You want the little clip side to go where those holes are, because that's what keeps the pins in the servo, in the servo connector. Now remember, you always want to keep your signal, your power, and your ground in their proper orientation when you're inserting these. Okay, so you get all three of them in there, and it's kind of hard to get them all the way in. I just take my razor knife and almost had that one all the way in, and just give them a little rub right down in there. And you'll know that you've got them in there when you hear this black plastic keeper click as it engages. So now we have custom length control wires for our ESCs. Put a little loop in here just to kind of help keep up some of the slack. And plug her in. Now you have all four servos, or ESCs rather, plugged into the KK2 board. We'll end up doing the same thing with the camera gimbal servo. We're going to cut it down, and because she is, as you can see, rather long, we'll need her to come to here. So I'm going to end up cutting her down. Now you always want to give a little bit of extra length, just because. You don't want it too short. And this one, I'll be able to show you up close here. Okay, so we've got our freshly cut end. Take your razor knife here, and you're just going to split those guys. Okay. and I take them out, I don't know, about 1/2, 5/8 of an inch. Okay, and we're going to take about 3/16 of an inch off each one. So now we have our leads. And twist these suckers together. Okay. Take your pin. Get her right down in there. Okay. Squeeze those together. And then down. Give it a little tug. Make sure she's down. I'm just going to give it a little extra squeeze. Now the guys in the back there, squeeze them together. And get them down. There we go. Now you have your custom pin. Okay. Now that we've got the ESCs wired up, the gimbal is wired up, maybe you can see that right here. With the gimbal wired up to our 8th pin, right down there, we're pulling power from the receiver down to the 5 pin. And we've got the 4 motors hooked up to the top 4. So, and we've got our power coming to the board for the battery sense, the voltage sense right here, and our wire going to the receiver and our buzzer. So we've got the board wired up, the gimbal's on. Now, oh, and we've got our video from our camera. Now we need to get the top plate finished so that we can do the install on this. Now on the top plate we've got the transmitter, the FPV transmitter, and we've got our power supply, the power filter. Now I've ended up packing this underneath. Let me see, you might be able to get that. A little shot there. I ended up taking the shrink wrap off the power filter and soldering these 2 legs to the pin connector inside here, right inside there, just because I don't want this pulling out. So we've got our JST connector powering the transmitter. And you can see here, these little dip switches are to change the channel on the transmitter, because your goggles up top, right here, you have your channel switches. I believe there's 8 channels available. So this is how you change your channels. And mine are all in the lower position. I believe this is channel 7 that this one is on. And I put it that way because I know that a lot of people, when they get these, they don't change the channel. They leave it all on channel 1. So I've got mine set to channel 7. It's 7 or 8, I can't remember exactly. So that right out of the box, if I'm flying with a bunch of other people, I shouldn't have to change my channel. Now, the problem we've got here, So we go ahead and we position this top plate on. With the battery sitting right here, we've really got no spot for our receiver. So what I'm going to end up doing is, so we've got right here, we've got the video transmitter. I'm going to go ahead and piggyback this underneath the video transmitter, kind of facing like that, so that the two antennae are pointing towards the front of the aircraft. It shouldn't build up any additional heat, just due to the fact that there's enough gap here that when it's flying there's going to be enough air going through there to cool the electronics down. So let's pop the transmitter off here, and because these holes are actually really tight for the zip tie, we're going to pop this here zip tie out, and let's see which hole is that. Okay. I'm just gonna hog this hole out here just a little bit more, so that the zip tie will fit just a little bit easier in there. And if I can, oh, there they are. Remember where my zip ties went. That's a lot better. Okay, then what we're going to do, because my transmitter already has some Velcro on the back there, I've got this here extra piece. This is originally where I was going to mount the receiver. Was right here on the front side of it, where the FPV transmitter goes right here. I was going to put the receiver right here. However, mounting the receiver right there interferes with the gimbal, so I'm not gonna put it right there. So we're gonna mount that. Put that little tab of Velcro right there. On the bottom, here's the top of the transmitter. We're gonna put that on the bottom of the transmitter, so that our receiver pops on just like that. I still have access to my leads going to the receiver. Pull the power filter out of the way there, so it'll sit something like that. The only problem with that, having it in that tight quarters, is going to be, now I can't really access the KK board underneath. So if I need to make corrections on my tuning, on my gains, I believe I'm going to have to end up taking this top plate off in order to make any necessary adjustments. But we're going to go ahead and put the zip tie back on here. If I can get it in the hole, that would be super. That up because I pulled this over to the center, and we want it off to the side so that the battery doesn't hit it. The battery will sit nice and flush. on that tray. So we now have the FPV transmitter, the receiver, everything is connected. Now we can go ahead and mount that sucker all the way down, and we've got our leads for our antenna poking out the front there, but I think I'm going to do something just a little bit different with those, because I do want them up out of the way of the props. So I'll run them up out the front just like that. Now they stick up like two little bug antennas, but they're far enough away from the FPV antenna that I think will be okay. And I actually screwed that up right there. Okay, and I kind of want this power filter wrapped around the back side here, so it'll come up like that and plug right into the balance lead. But everything is now tucked in quite nicely, actually. Everything is up out of the way. So we can now go ahead and put the nuts. They'll hold the top plate down. I'm just going to put two of them on for right now. That way if we have to pull anything apart, I've only got two to pull apart. And this might have been a bad idea, and that probably was. To keep these machine screws in place, I put nuts right here at the base of it to hold them into the frame. So let me put out the camera right there for a second, and we'll get our, this is an 8mm. These suckers tightened down here. Jesus, I can't even hold this goddamn thing in place. Okay, for all intents and purposes, she is now tightened down, even though I've only got these two screws holding it down. These two are just there, but she is tight. Looks good to me. Just want to make sure that any wires that might be kind of poking out there are tucked back in a little bit. We've got the power filter sitting right here, which will be attached to the battery. And we've got the battery lead which I'm actually going to zip tie up into place right there. We'll do that right now. Just because I don't want it flopping out. And we'll go ahead and widen out the second hole up here for the zip tie. Much better. Okay, batteries, connector leads tightened in place. I'm going to go ahead and put the battery on here. And now you can see that we've got our battery lead that we can connect to right here, as well as our balance lead that we can connect the power filter to right here. Okay, let's go ahead and transmitter's on. We're just going to pull the balance or the power filter up out of the way. Just kind of tuck it in right there for now. Let's go ahead and power the quad on. All right. Now, because I still haven't cut down the ESC leads going out to the motor, they still have the bullet connectors attached. We're going to end up zip tying them back here just for now, just for the time being, because I want to make sure everything flies right before I go ahead and cut those down. But what we can do is do a quick test to make sure everything is spun the right way, and that nothing's going to hit. I mean, we can see that everything's going to clear by at least a few millimeters. The camera up here, there's a spot right here where, I mean, that's maybe 2 or 3 millimeters clearance. You can see my camera's also off just a little bit. So let's go ahead and arm it. We are armed. Well, it looks to me like everything would disarm and power down. It looks to me like everything is clear. We're not going to hit anything, at least not yet, because I absolutely plan on hitting something with this. Probably at least the second time I fly it, whether it be a tree or some other inanimate object, preferably not a car, very hopefully not another human being. But we're definitely, you know, I mean, these things, if you're racing through the trees, you are at some point going to hit a tree. That's just the inevitability of FPV racing. So that is the full build for the FPV250 from hobbyking, slightly modified. That's kind of how we're going to build that there, slightly modified. So the last thing to do, we're going to button up the ESC leads here, zip tie them down, and we'll go ahead and take her out for the maiden and see how she does. Thanks for joining me on this build video. Tune in next time.